Good morning. I know normally I start with a joke or something funny or some special effect, but this isn't really one of those kind of videos. It's going to be kind of funny. In fact, it'll probably just make you angry. So we have some documents that Shawn Ryan released from the law firm representing the Canuck camp and what they're demanding of him. And I have his response, which I have not read through his response. I have read the demand letter from the lawyers for the camp, and these guys, I don't know if these guys are good lawyers, but I hate to say it, I wouldn't hire these people. But we're going to take a look. I will show you the exact words that they are having a problem with. They mentioned the other video with Elizabeth Phillips, but that's not their problem. They're not demanding that video be taken down. They're demanding that this specific section of his interview with Rhetorical be taken down. I will play it for you here. This is what they want gone.
I just interviewed
this right here.
Elizabeth Phillips. Are you familiar with this Camp Kanakuk?
I'm not.
It's the biggest Christian camp in the fucking world.
Yeah.
And I brought Elizabeth Phillips on, and she talks about how they've been molesting thousands of kids for years and putting them under NDA after a settlement so that they can never, as a kid, come out and talk about their sexual abuse at fucking Camp Kanakuk.
That's sick.
So that sentence is the only thing they're actually demanding be taken down. So we're going to go here. I will show you the letter, which is insane. This is not how you form a defense. But okay, fine. This comes from, let's see, Hush Blackwell. I'm sorry. I just realized what that means. Hush Blackwell. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. You're basically sending a cease and desist, silence letter, and your name is Hush. Okay, I'm sorry. This is actually one of the worst demand letters I've read in a while. You get some of these as life goes on, via Federal Express and first class mail. Okay, so this is a demand for retraction and public apology concerning the statements made during the podcast, quote unquote, who is protecting the Jeffrey Epstein files. Dear Mr. Ryan, this office represents Canuck Ministries, also known as Canuck. I have reviewed your publicly aired interview with Representative Rhetorical, which first aired on January 15th, 2026. I understand it continues to be available for public viewing on YouTube and other media internet platforms, resulting in a continuing defamation of my client. Specifically, you said during the interview, I brought Elizabeth Phillips on, we already watched this. So this specific part here is what they have a problem with. Okay. We'll dive into this once we read the response from Shawn Ryan, but basically, thousands of kids, I think, might be the only thing that you could probably argue on this. Because in the next statements here, although the subject of the interview concerned the Epstein files, you made an unsolicited, false, disparaging, and defamatory statement about Canuck, which you claim was a result of your communication with Elizabeth. I understand you are referring to Elizabeth Carluck Phillips, whose brother was sexually abused by Pete Newman in the early 2000s. Pete Newman was a camp director at Canuck Camp. Mr. Carluck was one of Peter Newman's victims that Canuck learned about in 2009 when Canuck learned of the nature and severity of the matter. Mr. Newman was immediately fired, and Canuck assisted in his prosecution. He's currently serving 2 life sentences plus 30 years for his actions. Yeah, he ain't coming out. Probably a good thing. Very much a good thing. After Mr. Newman's prosecution, multiple civil actions were filed against Pete Newman and Canuck. The lawsuits with number between 20 and 30. I read somewhere else that it might have been 57, but I'll have to check my math on that. That number doesn't sound out of the realm of possibility. Public identified the actions of Pete Newman and are still public records today. Pete Newman's prosecution was publicly covered, and the specific allegations concerning Mr. Newman were covered by local and regional media. To suggest Canuck messes thousands of kids is not just false, it's outrageously malicious with no regard for the truth. Okay. This sentence, now, they may not mean it to imply this, but I'm sorry. If somebody says thousands, they're probably being hyperbolic. 20 to 30 is still a lot. That's terrible. And you're like your problem is, well, it's not thousands. It's more like 20 or 30. What? That's what your issue is? It's called hyperbole. Okay, we'll just keep going. That is not how you defend yourself, but okay. As a result of the lawsuits and pre-suit demands, there are multiple confidential settlement agreements entered into with Pete Newman's victims. The victims and their families, including Mr. Carluck, were almost always represented by counsel. Yeah, that makes sense. In contrast to your NDA allegation, the overwhelming majority of victims and their families insisted on keeping settlement information confidential. Okay. Why would you want to keep settlement confidential? I don't know, maybe because they wouldn't pay you if you didn't. Okay. The confidentiality request was often initiated by the victim's parents or the victim. Why would you want it confidential? Why would anyone want to do that? Oh, let's not talk about this ever again. Whose benefit is that? Why would a victim ever benefit from not talking about what happened to them? Let's keep going here. I'm trying not to get angry. Okay. Many of Mr. Newman's victims are now in their 30s, and some have recently come forward to discuss things that occurred and the consequences of Pete Newman's actions to their lives about these victims. The truth is, Canuck has not withheld any information that was not done at the request or agreement of any victim that received a settlement as a result of Pete Newman's actions. Yeah, because you just it's the same thing. There have been victims who have requested they be released from the obligation of confidentiality. Canuck has agreed to those requests. Recently, a victim filed suit against Canuck in Southwest Missouri Court when asked whether the information could be made public. Canuck agreed. That's the only thing good about this letter here that I can say. At least they may believe that. They may have actually done that. I would like you to release all of them. Just let them all go. Your callous and malicious disregard of the truth as it relates to Canuck is inexcusable. You continue to perpetuate the false narrative that has been initiated by those like Miss Carluck and others, and it has to stop. Canuck will continue to endure suffering Canuck will continue to endure the suffering Pete Newman has caused, but they do not have to endure untruthfulness. You have 10 days from the date of this correspondence. Take down the portion of the interview and publicly apologize for defamatory statements. If you fail to do so, legal action will be taken. I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, Brian O'Wade, which is, I guess, their representative. Am I wrong here, or why do they have a typo? Yeah. They refer to it as Mr. Carluck. But it's Miss Carluck. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait. Mr. Carluck. I'll take it back. Mr. Carluck was Miss Carluck's brother at the time. Okay. I got you here. Yeah. All right. I'll give you that. This, I mean, what is their thing here? Molesting thousands of kids. Okay. I'm sorry. Now, I will say this. It makes it seem as if they're doing it now. But that's not what they are arguing. They're not arguing any of this. They're arguing about the technicalities of what an NDA means and whether they're actually letting people out of them. And they're arguing over the technicalities of, oh, it's not 1,000 people, it's only 20 to 30. That's still bad. You will not get a court to agree that your defamation has sustained you any actual monetary damages or reputational damages by the difference between, oh, they only did this to 1,000, they only did this to 20 kids, not 1,000. That's still bad. I'm sorry, I'm getting angry. I'm trying not to. Gotta breathe. All right, let's see what the response is from Shawn Ryan. It's gonna be good. I haven't read it, so this is my first reaction to it. It looks like he has Parlatory Legal Group. At least their name sounds better. Sounds kind of like, Regal. I've seen a lot of lawyers who just kind of show up and do things. These other guys for Canuck sound like they're just showing up and doing stuff. Get paid and leave. You know you're going to lose. But hey, we're going to read here. Dear Mr. Wade, the responding Mr. Wade from the law firm here. This office represents Vigilance Elite LLC and Shawn Ryan, collectively known as Mr. Ryan. In connection with your January 21st demand letter on behalf of Canuck Ministries, we write you to inform that your client's demand for retraction and apology is rejected in its entirety as legally and factually baseless. The statement is substantially true under Tennessee law. Your letter concedes the core facts underlying Mr. Ryan's statement. Pete Newman, a senior Canuck employee and camp director, sexually abused children at Canuck for multiple years in the early 2000s. Newman was prosecuted and is serving life sentences. 20 to 30 civil lawsuits were filed against Canuck, and an untold number of confidential settlement agreements were executed with victims that prevented them from publicly discussing the abuse. These admissions established the substantial truth of Mr. Ryan's statement as a matter of Tennessee law. Under Tennessee's sting of libel doctrine, the defense of truth applies so long as the sting, the injurious part, is of the statement is true, even if the statement contains other inaccuracies. Stone's, that's basically what I just said. 1,030, still bad. Stone's River Motors, Inc. versus Mid-South Public. Okay, this is just a lawsuit they represents. So, to stop it right there, in many lawsuits, you reference previous lawsuits to prove to the court that, hey, this is what happened before, this is how the lawsuit was resolved, and based on that, we're right. It's probably a little more complicated than that, but that's the basic gist of it. I'm not even a lawyer. I just read contract law in my office. The damaging words must be factually false. If they are true or essentially true, they are not actionable, even though the published statement contains other inaccuracies which are not damaging. ID at 1720. This test is... I don't know what that part is. The test is whether the libel as published would have a different effect on the mind of the reader from that which the pleaded truth would have produced. Smile Direct Club versus NBC Media. I'm going to have to take a look at that. The sting of Mr. Ryan's statement is that Canuck employees were engaged in systematic child sexual abuse over multiple years, and the victims were silenced by confidentiality agreements. Your letter admits both elements. Whether the precise number of victims is thousands or some lesser number does not change the defamatory thrust. In institutional child sexual abuse with systematic suppression of victim testimony, under Tennessee law, this is not actionable. That's exactly what I just said. It doesn't matter. No one's going to send your kid to a camp where, like, well, we didn't have 1,000. It was only 30. What? Yeah, not going there. The number of victims may well be thousands. Now, this is where evidence to the contrary to say it might actually be this number. Your letter does not and cannot prove the number of child victims is less than thousands. To the contrary, the evidence suggests Mr. Ryan's statement may be literally accurate. Now, this is the scary part for me. Oh, gosh. I'm shaking because I'm getting angry. I gotta calm down. Okay. Canuck has operated for over 100 years and served more than 500,000 children during that time. I think that's a long time. Pete Newman was not merely a counselor, but the director of K Country Camp, and according to victim accounts, the heir apparent to Canuck's founder. He had unsupervised access to thousands of children over multiple years. Your letter admits that some have recently come forward to discuss the things that occurred, and that others, like Miss Carluck, have accused Canuck of withholding information or hiding information about these victims. The admission of a cover-up makes the true number of victims unknowable. Only 20 to 30 victims have filed lawsuits, but your letter admits these victims were bound by confidentiality agreements that prevented them from speaking publicly. How many additional victims exist but have never come forward due to shame, trauma, or fear of violating confidentiality provisions? Your letter references only Pete Newman. It does not address whether other Canuck employees engage in similar conduct, nor does it account for the institutional failures that allow Newman's abuse to continue for years. Yeah, I will go over this with... there's another article about this that kind of really researches this, and it's bad. I will have to do another video on that because it's going to take a lot longer to go through it. But it's one of the worst things to read. It's just... I hate to say, it makes me angry. It makes me angry, and I try not to get too angry. Okay, gotta calm down. All right. Canuck continues to operate a camp at the very location where countless children suffered horrific abuse, a crime scene where institutional failures enabled systematic victimization. Given Canuck's own admission of withholding information and the systematic abuse of confidentiality agreements to silence victims, your client cannot meet its burden of proving the statement false. The burden is on Canuck to provide falsity, and it has not done so. Excuse me. Yeah, their letter really didn't do a whole lot to prove this or disprove it. Even if thousands were inaccurate, it would constitute a non-actionable rhetorical hyperbole. That's exactly what I said. It's hyperbole. Only if Canuck can prove through full discovery and disclosure of all abuse allegations, statements, and internal investigations that the number of victims is definitely less than thousands, would the statement even arguably be subject to a hyperbole analysis. Under Tennessee law, mere hyperbole or exaggeration intended to make a point are not actionable statements referencing these cases. Mr. Ryan's statement was made in the context of a podcast discussion about institutional abuse and government accountability. It was emphatic commentary on a matter of urgent public concern, not a precise and actuarial claim. Like I said, even then, it's still hyperbole. Granted, they have made the case that maybe it's not hyperbole. I honestly certainly hope it is hyperbole, because golly, that means there's even more out there. Oh, golly. You know, it's places like this, you think you're safe. You think, oh, these are Christian camps. These are good. I'm sorry. I guarantee they probably knew what that... If it is just that one guy, they probably knew what that one guy was doing. They knew he was doing some stuff that was inappropriate, but didn't care. Either that or you're literally the worst run company in the entire world. You don't know one of your higher-ups is doing things that are nuts. A reasonable listener would understand thousands as emphasis on the severity and systematic nature of the abuse and not as a literal head count. This is particularly true given the documented cover-up and the unknowable number of victims who have never come forward. Yeah, a reasonable listener, when someone says, I got thousands of these, how many is that? You don't know what that means. That's hyperbole for I have a lot. And a lot is, in this case, more than one. And that's all that means. If there's more than one in this situation, it's bad. Okay, that's it. And this kind of thing, this isn't like, oh, I have a lot of, I have a lot of money, or I have a lot of something else. This is more, anything more than one is a lot. Honestly, one is a lot. Part 4. The characterization of confidentiality agreements is inaccurate. Your letter disputes Mr. Ryan's characterizations that Canuck put them under an NDA, claiming instead that victims requested confidentiality. Yeah, this is where I had a problem with that letter, too. The distinction is immaterial under Tennessee law and, in any event, is contradicted by your own admissions. First, the existence of confidentiality agreements that prevented child victims from speaking publicly is undisputed. Whether those agreements were requested by traumatized children and their families or imposed by Canuck as a condition of settlement is a characterization, not a material fact. The legal effect is identical. Victims were silenced. Exactly. Granted, I lean toward it's the latter part of that, a condition of settlement, but technically, we haven't seen those agreements. So we don't know for sure, and we don't know what happened unless somebody comes forward and says, this is what happened. They kind of made us do this. And that would probably be something that they would argue would be covered under the NDA. Now, I would make the case that an NDA should not be enforceable in its entirety because it's being used to hide this, but they would probably use it and say, and now granted, this is speculation, that I would say that they would argue that you can't come forward and say that we made you do this because that's part of the NDA. That's what I think they'd be saying. But maybe these guys are a bunch of good guys and they are willing to, as a Christian, you should be willing to step into the light. Step into the light. Come on. You guys should do this. Sometimes people are Christian until it gets hard. Culturally Christian. These guys are Christian, because it makes them money. They know that they can get people to come in there and, send their kids. Oh, it's a Christian camp. Yeah, we'll send our kids there. It's a good place. There's nothing bad happening there. Hopefully this place has changed, but from the sound of their lawyers, it sounds like these guys are still run by a bunch of nut jobs. But hey, what do I know? Let's see. Second, your claim that victims requested confidentiality is self-serving and implausible. These were children who had been sexually abused by a trusted authority figure at a religious camp. The power imbalance between Canuck, a well-funded institution represented by sophisticated counsel, gosh, I can't even say words, and traumatized children of victims is obvious. To suggest that children or their families initiated demands for secrecy strains credibility? Is that even a word? Particularly given your admission that victims are now accusing Canuck of withholding information or hiding information. Third, even accepting your characterization, the fact remains that Canuck agreed to and enforced confidentiality provisions that prevented victims from speaking. Canuck had the power to refuse such provisions or unilaterally release victims for confidentiality. It chose to not do so for years until recently when public pressure mounted. Yeah. You'll find a lot of these NDA things. A lot of they're everywhere. They're even everywhere on YouTube. You'd be surprised how many YouTubers hire people and they have them sign NDAs and they're like, you can't talk about nothing. Yeah, you know what I did to the other guy in the office? I know you saw the whole thing. You ain't talking. Yeah, granted, doesn't cover up crimes. So, if you see bad things, report them. Under Tennessee law, truth is available as an absolute defense only when defamatory meaning conveyed by the words is true. So basically, if you're saying something that's absolutely true, you can't defame somebody. It's just not the way things work. The truth is the truth. They reference another case. The defamatory meaning here, that victims were silenced by confidentialities, is undisputably true. They were. Now, they're going to argue that, and they have argued that we released one guy from it because they asked about it, or whoever that person was that requested to be released, and we have. That's great. Good for you. You might as well send a letter to everybody and say, look, you know what? This is an issue for a lot of people. You are free to talk about what happened to you. Now, here's the thing that they're going to argue, and this is where the legal things get murky. Settlements and civil lawsuits are weird. To be convicted of a crime in this country, 9 times out of 10, you're in a court, you have to be convicted by a judge. The judge has to say, I believe the evidence against you means you did this thing. Or a jury has to look at you and go, yeah, that guy's guilty, and everybody vote. And it's beyond reasonable doubt. You probably heard that in a lot of legal senses. Beyond reasonable doubt means you are 99% sure that that guy did it. The only doubt you have is unreasonable. Like, oh, aliens picked him up and dropped him this way, and that's why everything happened. Reasonable. In a civil lawsuit, you don't have to be reasonable. You just have to be better at your case than the other guy. That's all it is. You have to be 51% sure that this guy did this thing. That's why he's not going to jail. That's why they don't go to jail in civil court. That's why, O.J. Simpson lost the civil case. He lost the civil case. He won the criminal case. They were not able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he did those things. But he did lose the civil case, which means that they believe he was responsible, but we can't prove the crime beyond reasonable doubt. But we believe him to be just enough financially responsible that he's sued and he owes millions of dollars. I forget exactly how much he lost, but and he never came back from it financially. So a civil case is different than a criminal case. Now, let's keep moving here. The statement concerns a matter of public concern is protected by the First Amendment. Sexual assault is clearly an issue related to health or safety, and therefore a matter of public concern under Tennessee law. Child sexual abuse at a prominent religious youth camp that serves thousands of children annually is unquestionably a matter of public concern. Mr. Ryan's reporting on the issue is protected by the First Amendment and the Tennessee Public Participation Act. Should Canuck choose to file suit, it would bear the burden of proving actual malice by clear and convincing evidence. That is, Mr. Ryan entered serious doubts about the truth of his statement or acted with purposeful avoidance of the truth. Canuck cannot meet this burden. Basically, they'd have to prove that he knew that this was not true and still said that this is true. At the very least, even if he's wrong, he firmly believed it, was provided reasonable evidence to say that this is true, and that's why he believed what he believed and why he said what he said. There's no, I don't think any reasonable person would ever find that to be wrong. Mr. Ryan's statement was based on his interview with Elizabeth Carlock Phillips, whose brother was a victim of abuse at Canuck, as well as public court records, media coverage, and widespread knowledge of the Newman prosecution. Reliance on a victim's family member's account and public records is entirely reasonable and does not constitute reckless disregard for the truth. A speaker's failure to thoroughly investigate a claim without more does not establish actual malice. Part 6. Tennessee's retraction statute does not apply. Your demand letter assumes Tennessee's retraction statute, Tennessee Code, whatever, applies to Mr. Ryan's podcast. This assumption is incorrect. The statute applies to newspapers or periodicals, terms that do not encompass podcasts or digital media. No Tennessee court has extended the statute to podcasts, and doing so would raise serious First Amendment concerns. I think this is a technicality that is probably not going to hold up in court. If they were to use this, I'm pretty sure a judge would look at that and go, yeah, but they mean everything. The judge can interpret this and say, well, newspapers and periodicals mean media in general. The law was probably written back when that was it. A periodical would be kind of more like a podcast. A periodical being like a new magazine or something. A podcast is kind of like a magazine, sort of, that you watch. Moreover, even if the statute applied, your demand letter fails to comply with its requirements. The statute requires that demand specifically specify the statements claimed to be libelous. Hold on, I will call you right here. They did specify the exact statement they didn't like in their letter. Your letter vaguely references that portion of the interview without identifying the specific statements requiring retraction. I don't know. They kind of did. Oh, wrong button. No. There we go. They use the word specifically, which anyone reading that would assume that that's the section they want cut out. So, but to be fair, they don't really go further on that. So, maybe. Your letter vaguely rests on profanity without identifying specific statements requiring retraction with the particularity Tennessee law demands. Gosh, I can't speak this morning. Part 7. Canuck's threat of litigation is an attempt to silence reporting on child sexual abuse. Your letter accuses Mr. Ryan of callous and malicious disregard for the truth and demands that he stop perpetuating a false narrative. This rhetoric reveals the true purpose of your demand to silence reporting on Canuck's institutional failures and to intimidate victims and their advocates from speaking publicly. Mr. Ryan will not be silenced. If Canuck chooses to file suit, it will face vigorous defense, including full discovery into Canuck's history of abuse allegations, internal investigations, and statements with victims. Depositions of Canuck leadership regarding what they knew about the abuse, when they knew it, what steps they took or failed to take to protect children, public disclosure of all victims, perpetrators, and institutional failures, and counterclaims under Tennessee Public Participation Act for filing a strategic lawsuit against public participation SLAP designed to chill speech on the matter of public concern. Yeah, so this is basically what I said before. When you file a lawsuit like this and you let it go to court, these guys are going to get discovery. And discovery is not going to hurt Mr. Ryan. It's going to hurt Canuck. One, providing all this information is difficult. Now, in this case, you can't really just delete all this stuff. This is all stuff that should be made available, and they have a right to any of this information, really, that applies to this case. And this case is so encompassing that they'd have access to emails, phone records, text messages, anything that they could get their hands on, really, that would allow them to prove these things. Moreover, under Tennessee law, Canuck will be required to prove actual damages, including lost donations, decreased enrollment, and quantifiable reputational harm with documentary evidence. Yeah, their reputation already sucks. You can't lose much more. This will require Canuck to produce financial records, including tax returns, donation records, enrollment figures, revenue statements, and communication with donors and prospective campers. If Canuck cannot prove actual financial harm, or if discovery reveals that donations and enrollment have remained stable or even increased despite the alleged defamation, it will become clear this lawsuit is not about reputational harm, but about silencing reporting on an institutional abuse. We welcome that discovery. Of course they do. This would destroy these guys. If they let this go to court, they'd lose everything. There is no way they're going to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they didn't have anything to do with anything. I can't guarantee, but I would believe, I have to say this very carefully, that discovery would destroy this place. The mere act of providing discovery is already a hassle and a pain. I've had to provide discovery on a few things, and they requested like everything related to something. And I'm like, guys, do you realize how many emails I'm going to have to print out for you to send to you? I finally just called them up and was like, hey, look, what are you actually looking for? Because we weren't even named in the case. We happened to be like affiliated with the people they were trying to get at, and they wanted to know if we talked to them. And I'm like, look, this is all we said to them. I can give you everything, but this is what you're looking for. I know what you're looking for. You want this statement right here where we talked about this. And they're like, yeah, we'll just take that. Don't worry about the rest. Because I literally had like 200 pages of printing that they'd have to read page by page. And I'm like, I know what you're looking for because this is what I would look for. Is this what you want? Because otherwise, I'm going to have to print all the rest of it out, and it's going to take forever. And I'm going to bill you for all this because I'm going to bill you for it because I'm not named in the lawsuit. I'm just happen to be here, and your discovery is requiring me to provide this. It's crazy stuff I have to deal with sometimes. Canuck's attempt to use litigation and threats to suppress speech about child sexual abuse is itself newsworthy. Why I'm doing this, and will be reported accordingly. Conclusion, Part 8. Your client's demand for retraction and apology is rejected. Mr. Ryan's statement is substantially true, concerns a matter of urgent public concern, is protected by the First Amendment and Tennessee law. Mr. Ryan stands by his reporting and will not retract or apologize. Should Canuck choose to file suit, we will defend vigorously and look forward to full discovery in the scope of abuse at Canuck, the institutional failures that enabled it, and the systematic use of confidentiality agreements to silence victims. We are confident that such discovery will vindicate Mr. Ryan's reporting and further expose the truth that Canuck seeks to suppress. Please govern yourself accordingly, and that's it. So, yeah. Insane stuff out here, guys. Is this going to go to court? Probably not. There is no way these guys are going to be like, well, could you? They'll try to. If they are willing to argue, they'll come back and say, well, just say that we no longer are this. That's all we have saying. We don't do that anymore. That might be the only defense they have to end this with them kind of on a high note. If they continue to firmly force Shawn Ryan to do this and fight this, Shawn Ryan is going to destroy them. This camp will be gone. Shawn Ryan is a big media personality, and the fact that this will go to court would be covered. I don't know the laws and regulations on if he can publicly comment on it while he's fighting the case. But once the case is done, it's a matter of public record, and then he can just report it like he would normally. Unless he's forced by the court to sign some type of confidentiality agreement with them. But I don't think Shawn Ryan's really the confidentiality agreement kind of guy. So I think even if he was to lose, which he will not, there is no way. I'm 99.9% sure that Shawn Ryan would win this case. So, but even if he did, he's the kind of guy who stands for the truth and doesn't let things get in the way of that. I've seen a lot of his show. I think he's a great guy. And if you haven't watched the show, definitely check it out. It's really good. I like a lot of it. I don't get as much time as I would like to watch longer podcasts. It's just, hour-long videos are hard to watch these days. But not hard to watch as in, like, difficult for me to find time to watch. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. If you are out there and you are a victim and you have not reported it, I would recommend contacting Shawn Ryan. He could probably use your statement to help prove his case. Speak out. Contact somebody. Contact the news. I'll talk to you if you don't need someone to talk to. I'm not as good as Shawn Ryan is, but maybe he's harder to get a hold of. I don't know, but I'm here. So anyway, I look forward to seeing how this goes. I really hope that Canuck gets their head out their butts and actually does the right thing here. But time will tell. Until next time, have a blessed day, and we'll see you then.